So welcome one and all to this most unholy of periods, this most gruesome of months. We are talking about Spooktember, and for Spooktember, to close it off, I'm going to be reading you a selection of 6 tales from the Necro ZX Spectrum Nomicon. Tales that will chill you to the very bone, and I don't think you'll see the end of each one. Oh, sorry. Evil laughs, not as easy as they make them look on TV and film. Just don't try that at home. Welcome back, my fiends and ghouls, and prepare yourself for the first of these chilling tales. For this one, we have to go to a wonderful summer camp, a camp by the name of Camp Crystal Lake. But are you ready to go on this journey on the ZX Spectrum? Let's take a look at the story. Well, I hope you weren't looking for anything too quality. Well, certainly not quality in the gameplay when it comes to Friday the 13th. Now don't get me wrong, the game mechanics themselves are fairly solid, as you can quite easily manoeuvre your game character across the game screens with ease. And for the most part, the tools and weapons that you can pick up to help you progress through the game, well, the mechanics of this particular facet of the game are fairly solid for the most part, because sometimes you will get a weapon right in the edge of the screen, and try as you might to come in from whichever angle you try, you will not be able to pick up that particular weapon. Now the aim of the game is quite simply to find the Sanctuary Cross, get it into one of the buildings in the game, and I would imagine preferably the church, and then convince your fellow camp counsellors to follow you post haste into that Hall of Sanctuary. But of course this is a Friday the 13th game, and what would a Friday the 13th game be without the wonderful Jason Voorhees? Well, it wouldn't be a Friday the 13th game, and in this particular adaptation, Jason is out and about trying to get you and bury an axe deep inside your skull, as he is with your fellow camp counsellors. However, if you decide to take Jason Voorhees on one-on-one, whether you be armed with a pitchfork, a sword, a spear, or even a chainsaw, then the outcome is probably going to be in Jason's favour. It's not a game of great depth, and the real horror is pretty much in the game itself, because if you play this, you will be filled with nightmares of mediocre gameplay and another poor licensed game nestling in your head. So unless you're an absolute die-hard fan of the Friday the 13th franchise and of course the ZX Spectrum, then steer well clear of Camp Crystal Lake on the ZX Spectrum. The next tale from the Necro ZX Spectrum Nomicon is a tale from outer space. Well, they started in outer space and brought their cross-dressing habits here. But will our hapless hero be able to save his beloved? Who knows? Let's just take a look at the next tale of terror. And of course that's a wonderful Rocky Horror Show, not the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because this is a Rocky Horror video game show. Straight from the twisted mind of Richard O'Brien, here we have a video game adaptation of the wonderful stage play and movie, and I'm gonna have to say straight away that this is not a bad game. Don't get me wrong, it's not a very long game, it's not a very complicated game, but if you're a fan of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, you're certainly going to find something in this game to keep you interested. The gameplay is fairly straightforward. You play as either Brad or Janet, and you have to save which one you didn't choose. And to do so, all you have to do is find all the missing parts of the big screen, which are littered all across the mansion, and of course avoid as many of the enemies as possible. And talking about the enemies, of course, are pulled straight from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Those classic and beloved characters such as Frankenfurter, Magenta, Riff Raff and the rest of the cast are all here trying to get in your way and stopping you from saving your better half. As I said, of course, the game is not overly complicated, it's easy to get to grips with, and it's quite fun at its core. It is of course one of those games that you're set to a timer, but the timer is quite generous, and once you get to grips with the controls, you'll find this a fairly simple game to complete eventually. The game itself may not be as much of a classic as the stage production or the film, but if you're a fan of the Rocky Horror Picture Show and the ZX Spectrum, then I would advise that you actually play this one at least once. Our next story is an age-old story. Knight meets Girl. Girl gets abducted by Demon, and Knight then has to run and save the girl. But are you ready for Ghosts and Goblins on the ZX Spectrum? Now, of course, I'm not going to talk too much about Ghosts and Goblins in the ZX Spectrum, because if you're watching this, you've played Ghosts and Goblins on probably many different consoles. And if you're as old as me, then you've definitely played it at the arcades as well. And believe it or not, the ZX Spectrum port of Ghosts and Goblins is actually a very decent port. Now, if you're even remotely aware of the ZX Spectrum, you know a lot of the game developers, especially back in the day, tried to avoid colour clash by making the games monochromatic. With Ghosts and Goblins, however, they decided to put in a bit more work and give us a little bit more colour. Now, of course, that can make Arthur a little bit difficult to see at times, and the zombies as they come out the ground. The game itself is just as difficult as any other port of Ghosts and Goblins, and if you get a chance to play this one, it's well worth the effort. As for me, however, I don't think I've ever managed to get to grips with the game, not even on the arcades, and playing it on a 14-inch CRT back in the day didn't make the game any easier. But it's without a doubt a classic game, it's a must-play game, so get yourself a copy of Ghosts and Goblins on the ZX Spectrum and give it a try for yourself. Next up is a tale that comes from a book much like the Necro ZX Spectrum Nomicon, but you must pronounce it correctly or bad things may happen in Evil Dead. Now, I'm not even going to remotely try and sell the Evil Dead and the ZX Spectrum to you, because this is truly the epitome of shovelware on the ZX Spectrum. We see it time and time again with licensed games where publishing houses and developers get their hands on an IP and just throw anything at it. Well, the Evil Dead is absolutely no exception to the absolutely terrible, horrific shovelware that we saw from intellectual properties that came from movie franchises back in the day. This top-down multi-screen game is in absolutely no way, shape or form a decent game. It's not even a horrific game unless you're talking about the amount of money that you would have spent on this just to play a game from a franchise that truly did scare you back in the day. The graphics are basic and horrible, the gameplay is janky as all hell itself. So please, for the love of your sanity, do not try the Evil Dead on the ZX Spectrum, it's just not worth your soul. Now next, I must caution you not to go further if you are of weak disposition, if you have a heart condition or even a weak soul, because the next game might pretend to be soft and cuddly, but it's anything but soft and cuddly. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the game itself. The game is quite interesting, it's nothing special, but it's a visual presentation of this game. Now, this is a game from 1987. Many people looking at this might think it's a modern homebrew, but it's not. This game was developed and published for the ZX Spectrum in 1987. And who would have thought that almost 40 years ago we had developers out there who were so twisted and so distorted in their worldview that they could produce a game like this. Now, there's no denying it, this game is without a doubt a horror game, but the true horror is all wrapped up in its visual presentation. I don't think there's many games that you will ever encounter, not even modern days, that has the aesthetics that this game has. It's an absolute acid trip in your visual perception, and it's this constant assault on your eyeballs that make this game truly worth playing. Now, don't get me wrong, you're not going to play it for too long, but you are going to want to try it just to say at one point you did sit down and try to play the most inappropriately titled game ever in the history of video games, Soft and Cuddly on the ZX Spectrum from 1987. So there you go, my friends, if you've managed to survive this long, that is... no more evil laughs. Tales from the Necro ZX Spectrum Nomicon, And what did you think of those? Did you face any of your fears in those games back in the day? Are you tempted to dip in yourself? Well, be warned, they are not for the faint of heart. And until next time, as always, thank you for watching, and cheerio!